Hi, and a very good morning to everyone. My name is George Asian. Sorry, we're starting way beyond time schedule. We had some technical issues, but we are good to go. We've started, and I wanted to join us. Today, we'll be talking about something very important in public speaking, and we will be talking about the dynamics of communication. Every communication has the mechanics of it, and then we also have the dynamics of it. So if you are a student public speaking school, I need to get your notes. I need to start taking down notes because we learn stuff that will help us. We're looking at effective communication. How can you become an effective communicator? How can you become a commanding communicator? When you stand on the podium to give your speeches, how do you command attention? How do you get people to follow your line of thinking, to toe your line of thinking? And this will only happen when you understand these dynamics of communication. So get down your notes to write. All through history has been littered by orators that spoke. People like Cicero. Have you ever heard of Cicero? Cicero of ancient Rome was said to be such an orator that whenever he spoke, people will stand up and give. Wow, what a speech. People like Demosthenes of ancient Greece. Demosthenes of ancient Greece was a stammerer. He had a speech impediment, and this fellow would go, because he lost his inheritance at some point, because he couldn't speak. He went to the seashore, put pebbles in his mouth, and practiced speaking. He made himself one of the greatest orators and politicians of his time in ancient Greece. And this fellow, when he spoke, people would say, "Oh, let us go march, let us march." It has been said that we have two orators of antiquity, Cicero and Demosthenes. People, whenever Cicero gave a speech, people stand up and give him a standing ovation. Whenever Demosthenes gave a speech, people would say, "Let us march." And so Cicero epitomizes presentation, and Demosthenes epitomizes persuasion. People may clap hands for that person who is a presenter, but they will follow a persuader. And so one of the things we want to help you do is not just be a public speaker, not just be a presenter, but to literally transition from just being a presenter to becoming a persuader. And this is why this topic is so important. The dynamics of communication. What makes communication tick? What makes it? The first thing I want you to write down your notes is that for communication to truly occur and to be impactful, you need to understand three constituents or three parts of it. What makes convincing, what makes communication great are these three parts. The first thing is connection. Run down through history, people who were amazing speakers found a way to connect. Connection is vital. What do you mean by connection? Connection means that you want to learn to establish rapport. Connection means that you want to relate to the people. Connection means that you want to find common ground. Connection means that you want to identify with the audience you're speaking to. I'm speaking to a bunch of young people, all right? And these young people are 21st century social media savvy kinds of people. What's the best way to dress? I can go on my t-shirt, my sneakers and a jean, and that will suffice. That is trying to find connections with them. That is trying to mirror them literally. I'm speaking to a bunch of bankers. These bankers are all suited up with their ties. What's the best way to dress? I'm going to have to dress like them with my suit and my tie so that I can mirror them and form that bond of connection. So mirroring is a part of connection that you do to enable you to become a great speaker. Forming connection. One of the things that we say about connecting is that you don't speak to an audience you don't know. You don't speak to an audience you don't reach. And a lot of speakers make this mistake. I mean, how dare you climb the stage and start addressing people that you have not researched, that you have not had some knowledge about? And that's why key to communication is audience analysis. analyzing the kind of audience based on demographics, analyzing them based on their thinking patterns, their culture, their familiarity with your subject. We've said it severally, but it's important. It's a major part of your preparation. Outside of your subject, the audience analysis is a vital part. So you sit down, analyze, find out what they are, who they are, where they're coming from, and then these details will enable you to engage. So we often say that audience analysis precedes audience engagement. Before you can effectively engage the audience, you want to analyze them. And when you combine audience analysis and audience engagement, you have what we call audience appeal. They're appealing to the audience. And all of these forms really forms what we call connection. And it's the first part. You know, a lot of people try to convince people, but in an attempt to convince people, they lose out and not really get the results they're looking for, because first of all, you have to connect with the people. Does it make sense to you? All right, so the second thing that is very important, okay, I must add that if you're climbing on the stage, if you ever you're climbing on the stage, one of the things you want to do is smile. Someone told me I'm giving a speech and all of the faces are so strong and so hardened. How do I approach them? Smile. A smile will literally disarm even the most difficult audience. So use the smile as your weapon as a speaker and you get more results. So the second thing that we need to pay attention to in communication is casting. What does it mean to cast? To cast literally means to spread your seeds, you know, to say words, quality words, because you knowing the fact that the words that you're saying are seeds and they can grow. And I often tell people, I say, be careful what you say, because the words you are saying to people, they are seeds and they can grow. They can fruition, they can grow into fruits and impact people's life. Words are seeds. So when we say casting, we're actually talking about, you know, throwing seeds of words. But beyond that, another metaphor that can greatly describe the term casting is to paint pictures. And one beautiful thing you notice about communicators is that communicators are casters. They know how to paint pictures. Learn how to paint pictures with words. So somebody's asking me right now, how do I paint pictures with words? I tell you, the fastest way and the greatest way to paint pictures with words is to learn to tell a story. Learn to tell stories. Great communicators are great storytellers. Now, if you don't know how to deliver top-notch speeches, but you can tell good stories, you would always be on point. People connect strongly with stories than they connect with your preaching and all of that. So we want to learn how to tell good stories. And we have a course that we teach people on how to tell a good story. You must learn how to tell a good story. Let me tell you why stories are important. People may resist the sales presentation, but they will not resist the story. And one of the ways to go past the barriers of the conscious mind into the subconscious is to tell stories. I tell parents, I say, if you want to work with the kids, I want them to get them to do your biddings. Don't give them instructions, tell them stories. Embed the instructions in the stories. Great philosophers and great prophets, Jesus inclusive, use stories to pass across great truths. We call that parables. So storytelling is very important. Aside connecting with people very strongly, stories also help us paint. We can use stories to paint pictures to inspire the imagination of people. So we connect with the emotions of people when we tell stories, and we also get their minds to imagine stuff. And there's nothing as powerful as that. Whenever you're speaking to an audience, realize that people are getting into trance. What's a trance? A trance is like imagining. You know, some of these trance, we have short trance and we have long trance. Short trance is, 1 second to 3 seconds. So in 1 second, you can go into trance. If I start talking about my mom right now, you immediately start thinking about your mom and then you go into some kind of trance. Or I talk about my boarding school experience, you immediately, and so trance is so important. Trance is so important and it happens when you tell stories. When you tell stories, you put people into trance. Remember that when you tell a story, you put your audience into trance. When you tell a story, you put your audience into trance. And that's what casting is all about. And let me just go a little to talk about storytelling. We actually have a program, a course where we teach on the 5 elements that make for a good story. And all those things have to be in place. The first element we talk about when we're telling stories is your story should have character. Characters, and what I mean that there's this thing that Nollywood and Hollywood has done for many years, and we call it the actor-villain dynamic, where you have in every story that has been, a blockbuster has its actor. There's always the actor and there's the villain. And so in telling stories in speeches, you also want to add that mix into your storytelling. Beyond that, aside character, your story should also have dialogue. What do I mean by dialogue? There should be a conversation. I mean, this guy said to me, hi, what's up? I said, fine. That's like a dialogue already in my conversation. So what you do, dialogues in storytelling and in speaking, is that dialogue quickly inspires the imagination. It inspires the imagination of the audience. It inspires the imagination of the audience. And it also reveals the creativity of the speaker. So you want to have dialogue in your speeches. You also want to have, beyond dialogue, you also want to have drama, some kind of drama. Don't give a speech without, tell a story without drama. A bit of suspense, and then if you tell a story, make sure it has a point. So this is very important. 5 elements that you need to have going for you in storytelling that can help you put people into trance: character, dialogue, suspense, drama, and then points. So if you use that, I'm going to teach that some other time extensively, and even give you a story that will put you into trance and show you how it works. But here's the point: casting is a major part of speaking. It's a major part of communication. And you as a leader and as a speaker, you want to learn how to paint pictures. People do because they see. People move because they see. All progress is traceable to vision. All progress is traceable to clarity. Now, the reason why people are not going the direction you want them to go is because they're only hearing you, they are not seeing what you're saying. And the goal of a communicator is not just to get people to hear them, but to see what they're saying. Because when people see what you are saying, their emotions, their passions, their motivations will be triggered, and they will move towards the direction. So vision precedes motion, and vision births passion, births motivation, and that ultimately leads to motion. That ultimately leads to progress. So my goal as a speaker is not just to say words, but to get you to see words. When you can see them, your emotions are triggered and there is progress. So casting is painting pictures. One of the fastest ways to do that is to tell stories, to be very descriptive in your illustrations, to use examples, to be very relatable so that people can see what you're saying. Now, when you connect to people and then you cast through storytelling and use of idioms and use of metaphors and use of idiomatic expressions, what the next and the last part of communication that's effective is convincing. So it just happens naturally. You start off by connecting people, that you transit to casting, painting pictures, and doing that very well through good storytelling or matching out your point with examples and illustrations, and then you naturally will convince people to do your bidding. Now let's talk about convincing, because in the dynamics of communication we have to talk about the effectiveness of communication. How effective is communication? And this point is so important. I want you to start writing down. I'm sure you've written down the first 3 things that's important and vital: connection, casting, and then of course we have the last point, which is convincing. Let's talk about the 7 elements that facilitate effective communication. Every time there's no effectiveness in your communication, one of these 7 elements has an issue. One of them. And that has helped me, and that's helped me as a junior speaker. That's helped me to do greatly as a speaker. Every time there was a problem in the communication process, that's one of those 7 has an issue. So let's look at the 7. The first is the encoder. The encoder. Who is the encoder? The encoder is the who in the communication process. The encoder is the sender of the message. All right. So who is the encoder? If the encoder has, of course, aside being the sender of the message, the encoder is also the owner. Okay, so you've got to have some level of ownership of your message. You don't just want to send a message, you want to own your message. It's not enough to have what to say, you need to know what you're saying and have some sense of ownership of that message. That will be revealed through your convictions, and that will be revealed through your persuasions, and it will impact on people. So the encoder is not just the sender of the message, it's also the owner of the message. Now, a few things must be going well for the encoder, for the communication process to be effective. One, the encoder must have confidence. A lot of speakers, who is the encoder? The encoder is a speaker, is the one who's convinced. Now, a lot of speakers suffer from glossophobia. Glossophobia is a disease of speaking. It's a nervousness of the tongue. It's a combination of two words, glosso and phobia. Tongue being glosso and phobia means fear. So a lot of people suffer from that malignant disease called fear, inferiority complex, and glossophobia. You've got to deal with it, because the level of confidence you have will determine to a large extent whether you convince people, because confidence convinces. It begins with that. So the encoder must have confidence. Number two, the encoder must have credibility. What ancient Greek people call ethos. Ethos means credibility. Beyond us, credibility means capacity to because when you're speaking to an audience, people are literally evaluating you. They want to know, why should I listen to that guy? Why should I listen to this guy? And so you want to be perceived as an authority. So the next thing that the encoder needs to have going for him is credibility and capacity. And then, of course, the encoder must have competence. The encoder must know how to connect strongly. The encoder must know how to paint pictures, and that's casting. And very importantly, the encoder must know how to convince. And also, the encoder must have charisma. Charisma means swag, because there's a certain level of charisma you need to have in your speaking that will facilitate effective communication. Not just being monotonous, but you've got to be more dynamic. And that's why Socrates, in describing the pathway to persuasion, he said ethos is the first thing. Ethos means credibility, pathos being passion, the next thing, and then the final thing is logos, mean having content. So these are the qualities the encoder must have going for him. And if you're writing anything, you want to write down encoder and write down the several C's that the encoder must have going for him. One being character, competence, charisma, content, casting, connection, confidence, credibility. All of those C's make sure that the encoder is good to go in the communication process. And so the effectiveness of the communication will be the possibility of effective communication will be higher because the encoder is good. The next thing is the code, CODE. What's the code? The code is the message, the code is the lesson, is the moral, is the philosophy, is the core, is the crux, is the idea, is the content, is the subject, is the message, is the entirety of, it's all that you're speaking is. And so a lot of times we spend so much on the code and fail to work on the encoder. So the code has to be done well though. You've got to prepare the code. So the code is the what, the encoder is the who, and the code is the what. What are you talking about? Is there validity in what you're talking about? Is there profundity? Is your code profound? Have you done your research well? Does it have content? Does it have credibility? Is there a depth in your speaking? And so you want to speak with depth. People should listen to you and know that this guy has done research. It's not just head knowledge. It's based on your meditation, based on thoughts given to that presentation. So code is important. The next thing that's very important in the communication process and delivering effectiveness in communication is called the channel. What is the channel? The channel is the platform. Is the platform for expression. It's the medium of expression. So what platform are you using? And I tell you, friends, as an encoder, you've got to be careful about your channel. Channel is the microphone, channel is the platform, the podium, channel is radio, TV, television, internet, YouTube, Facebook, all of that makes up the platform. And I tell my students regularly, I say to them that the teacher in the classroom talking to 20 students and the presenter on radio speaking to a large number, who has more influence? And so what raised up his hand, I had one of those and she said, well, the teacher in the classroom is supposed to have more influence because of the depth of his teaching. All right. However, the radio presenter on radio has more influence because of the width, because of the reach he has. And so I said to them, I said, okay, that's fantastic. So that means that both of them have some level of influence, but one has depth and the other has width. Now, what if the teacher finds his way to this platform on radio, goes to radio? So on radio, he will not just have depth of teaching, he will also have width. All right, so your platform matters, the kind of platform you're using. When you also use the internet and master platforms on the internet, you can reach out to a lot of people. I did television for a number of years, for 9 years, and it helped build my credibility because you see, I did radio for 1 year, then I did television for 9 years. On radio, audio communication is fantastic, but it's not as powerful as audio visual. Audio visual is television. It made so much, it literally skyrocketed my credibility my toes by 100% or more, because by going audio visual you make more impact. People think that anybody that's on television who you can see is an authority, and that's good going for you. So your channel is important. The kind of channel that you're using to communicate is important. So if you have a strong message, don't use a weak channel. If you have a strong message, don't use a weak channel. It's very important that you use a credible and a strong channel. The internet is here to stay, and believe me, it doesn't matter what you think, the internet is here to stay. The social media is powerful, and you've got to learn the social media to get yourself going. So let's move on to the next one. So we talked about the encoder, we looked at the code, we looked at the channel. The next important element is the decoder, and the decoder here is the receiver of the message. Now, that we talked about that earlier, that you need to analyze and know what kind of audience you're speaking to. So the receiver of the message is the decoder, is the one who receives, who processes information. And now listen to me, friends, when it comes to communication, the decoder or the audience, the congregation, the investor, anyone who is listening is very important. You want to do your due diligence research on them. On stage, you usually will have three kinds of people. When you're standing on the podium to speak, you usually will have three kinds of decoders when you're speaking to them. And having done your research before you climb the stage, these three guys will be on the podium, will be on the stage with you. So in talking to them, you want to pay attention to which of them is more prominent. So I'll tell you the three kinds of decoders you'll have most likely. The first ones are called the V decoders. V decoders are visual decoders. What do I mean by visual decoders? Visual decoders are people who take the words they're listening to your words, and they convert those words to pictures. They take those words that you say to them, and they find a way to convert the words you're saying to them into pictures. All right, so they are visual kinds of people. They are visual audiences. All right, they like to look at slides. They like to look at illustrations. They like to look at painting. They like to look at what you're writing on the board. They like to look at what you're putting together on the flip chart. They are visual decoders, and pay attention to them when you speak. The second kind of decoders you most likely have in an audience are the F decoders, or the feeling decoders. These guys want you not to be monotonous. They want you to be passionate. They want you to become, a lot more passionate than you are, so they can connect with you. If you're monotonous, if you don't have vocal variety, you will not connect with the feeling decoders. So the F decoders are also an important part in the communication mix. And the last one is the C decoders. C decoders are content or conservative decoders. Content driven or conservative decoders. They are not interested in your razzmatazz, in your sway, in your jump around, your passion. They want to see content. They're looking out for depth, and these are the guys who take down a lot of notes. So you have the V, the F, and the C that will be present in any audience. And one of the ways to quickly identify V and F is by telling a story. If you tell a story, remember that you can be very descriptive in your storytelling. You will paint pictures, and so the V will connect with you strongly, and the F will connect with you if you have suspense, dialogue, and emotions in your stories. All right, so you need to join our class, our Podium Dynamics Academy class, paid class, to get to understand VFC very well, and how to identify them, and how to best reach out to them. So decoders are the receivers of the code. They are the audience, the listeners, the receivers of the message. But beyond just being receivers of the message or the code, decoders are the interpreters. Now, I want you to pay attention carefully. They don't just receive a message, they interpret the message. And so, I have people who come to me and say, I've been saying this to my people, but they don't seem to be getting it. They don't give me the right kind of feedback. The interpretation of what I'm telling them is wrong. Now, so you see, because actually, the real communication is the interpretation. The real result, effectiveness of the communication is in the interpretation. All right. So reception and interpretation are not the same thing. They are receiving your code, and they interpreting it. Like manner is not the same thing. You become a good speaker when reception and interpretation aligns, when they become one, and that's your goal. That should be your goal. So the decoders are the interpreters of the message, and that's what real communication is. That leads us to the fifth element, and that fifth element, you're taking down notes, is the feedback. Now the feedback is the response or reactions of the decoders, either in words or in deeds. The response or reactions of the decoders, either in words or in deeds. And ideally, the goal of communication is feedback, or the goal of communication is interpretation. So we have looked at 5. Let's go over them again. Encoder, code. Encoder is the who, code is the what. Encoder is the sender, code is the message or the what. Channel is the how, or the medium of expression, platform of expression. Decoder is the receiver or interpreter, the whom. And then feedback is the response or reactions of the decoder, either in words or in deeds. All right. And so we're looking at the last 2 elements, but I'm going to put them together. The last 2 is situation and noise. Situation and noise. So if the encoder himself is not in a good state, is not motivated, has the bad news, just received the bad news, not feeling too good, the situation is not good for him, his condition is not very right, it will affect the communication process, it will affect the effectiveness of the communication process. If the audience are not feeling so good, they are not in the right state of mind, or the environment they're staying isn't so smooth or sound, maybe it's hot, or they are too spaced out, it will affect the response they will give, it will affect the effectiveness of communication. So situation is, you need to find a way to deal with any kind of situation that may arise as you speak. And then the last part is noise, and basically noise means distraction, something that distracts you from learning. So the 7, I'm going to go over them again, are encoder being the sender or what or who, code being the message or what, channel being the platform for expression or how, decoder being the receivers or whom, and then feedback being the response or the reactions, either in words or in deeds, and then the final things are situation and noise. So this is how we're going to best define communication. Communication is the process, it's a process by which an encoder transfers a code to a decoder through a channel with the expectation of feedback without the interference of noise and situation. So I'm going to repeat that again, because you see, that truly is an all-encompassing definition of what communication is. By making sure that all 7 elements that I've mentioned is in that definition. Communication is the process, is a process by which an encoder transfers a code to a decoder through a channel with the expectation of feedback without the interference of noise or situation. That is a very powerful definition. So if you're taking down notes, write that down and understand what communication is. So if all the 7 elements are in place, you will not suffer ineffectiveness in your communication. So every time there's a problem in the communication process, you're not getting the kind of feedback you seek, ask, did I connect with the decoders? Who were the decoders? Were they V, F, or C? How strong, how valid, how profound was my code? All right. My channel, did I use the right channel? Was it a small channel? Was it a weak channel? Was it a huge channel? The encoder, how am I feeling? Am I feeling confident? Does the decoder perceive me as someone who is credible, who has capacity, or who is charismatic? What kind of situation is there in this process? Or what kind of noise? If I get all 7 right, communication will be effective. Did you learn something? You learned something? All right, so I'd like to hear your feedback in the comment section. Reach out to us. Make sure that this video will be stored on this platform. You can go back and watch, learn, take down notes, and see how you can make yourself better. So we're talking about communication dynamics throughout this week, and we'll learn about how to become a lot more effective, whether you're a communicator in the marketplace, you're a communicator in the church space, you're a communicator, wherever you're a communicator, whether you choose persuasion or negotiation, we'll be teaching you all of everything you need to know, the pros and cons, particularly on communication, and you don't want to miss it. So we just started, and I'm sure you got a lot of value. Now, if you want to join our community, an exclusive community where you subscribe 3,000 naira only monthly to be in an exclusive community, and you get all the courses, all the trainings, mentorship. We get to receive your assignments, we get to give you assignments and receive them and assess and evaluate you, make you a better speaker, make you a better persuader. Then you need to reach out to me. I'm going to put my details down here. You reach out to me and then we can show you what to do to be part of that training. So there's WhatsApp training that goes on, there's Zoom training, Facebook Live trainings that go on. There's also a feedback mechanism that we have from you that enables us to assess you and evaluate you. You don't want to miss any of that. I tell you, don't just hear about public speaking. Go to a public speaking school. Don't just claim to be a public speaker. Go to public speaking school and be well taught. Like I often say, that nobody will teach you public speaking better than we would, because we are teaching you the best model. You know, everything that has to do with public speaking all put together just for you. I look forward to seeing you and working with you. God bless.